Very good. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our ICD-10. I've kind of called it the how-to webinar. It's how to incorporate this ICD-10 change into your kind of everyday work, getting ready for that October 1st deadline. And so, first of all, I should just double check. Can everybody hear me okay? Or at least one person acknowledge you can hear me okay?
You're good with Barbie.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate that. We are recording this as more of a kind of a group training webinar than it is a presentation about concepts and things like that. Well, we're going to take you through several things, and here's what the agenda is going to be, if I can get it to cooperate. There we go. The agenda is going to be going over 4 different things that are going to help you prepare your practice and your providers for ICD-10. The first one is just getting a handle on what are the codes that we use in our office, the ICD-9 codes, so that you can get a starting point for the codes that you most frequently use in your practice. And the idea here is to engage with your providers. I don't think you're going to be able to do this on your own, but to engage with the providers and discuss, if you will, the codes that you frequently use. And you can use this as a tool to work your providers into how they're going to search for codes, and also to decide which of the new ICD-10 codes might we want to incorporate into our encounter form, so that when charges or visits are being captured, if you don't want to have to search for every single diagnosis code, if you want kind of a little thing that speeds up the whole process by being able to pick off of a list, like the old ICD-9 encounter form was, then this gets you thinking about what codes might be included in that list. And then we're also going to talk about how to decide which of those multiple codes to use. And there is a concept around nesting of the codes that Bruce is going to explore, which takes us to the second topic that we're going to demonstrate today. And that is, Bruce is going to take us into the new encounter form editor. It's got just, because it's the type of thing that you're doing in administration, it's got a little glitchiness to it, because it transcends the 9 codes, the 10 codes, old functionality, new functionality. But Bruce will try and get you comfortable with how to create new encounter forms, and he's also going to explore how to nest codes, show you how that visit might actually play out when a provider is, or someone in the office is selecting diagnosis codes to go along with procedures for specific data service. Now that's going to lead us to another issue, which really only comes into play if you're leveraging the electronic medical record. It kind of comes into play if you're not using the EMR, but you don't want to have to look at all of the old code. And so Brad Sklar is going to go into the cleaning up the problem list. He's going to show you the different functions, how to search for codes, how to inactivate. There's some pretty cool things you can do to speed things up. But I want to kind of give everybody the heads up. This is not a fast process. So I'm glad you're attending the webinar now, because it is going to take a concerted effort. It's going to take a bunch of hours to get you to where you need to go. And if you start now and just clip a couple hours a week, I think you'll be in good shape. If you leave it all until September, you're going to be panicked for sure. The last thing that we're going to show you, and I will work with this, I'll demonstrate a little bit, and I may be leaning on Cheryl, because Cheryl's got more actual experience with this than I do, is how to actually utilize the dual coding functionality, how to manage visits with both ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes and their corresponding charges, and then just to give you the heads up on how things can manifest themselves in terms of claim edits and things that strategies you might want to do to work you through this. So we're going to show you 4 things, relatively in-depth. We definitely want you to ask questions. You can utilize the chat. you can unmute yourself and just type in. Because we are going over 4 things and we only have basically, another 55 minutes to roll on this, and we want to leave time for questions, we're going to try to cram into about 10 minutes the details on how this works. So don't panic if you're furiously trying to write notes and you can't figure it out. We are going to send out this presentation, which has some detail in it. We're also recording the session, and we're available for one-on-one training as well. So here's what I'm going to be showing you, how to pull the reports and how to look at the reports. Bruce is going to show you on the encounter form how to literally start from scratch and create a new one, and look at nesting, show you how to use it. And I think this might be one of the more difficult areas, because this is not something that most people do very often. So we would definitely want to allot some time for Q&A on that. When Brad goes into cleaning up the problem list, there's a very straightforward 4-step process that if you follow, you'll be getting through these in the least amount of time possible. Again, it's just a huge amount of time that's going to be invested in doing this. There's benefits to cleaning up the problem list that go into billing, that go to the electronic medical record, so it's worth doing, and it's the type of thing that you can start that process now, because I'm positive in looking at most people's problem lists that there's a lot of stuff in there that really, while historically it's very important, it's not something that needs to be looked at every single time that a provider comes in. And in fact, it might be better to not have some of those things coming up. Then we're going to move into the dual coding, and we'll show you where to go, how to manage the dual codes, and even how to create test files if you want. So in addition to that, we've got in the presentation things that we covered from the last presentation. I'm going to include in the deck that we send out, just reminding you of what the Care Tracker tools are that are in the toolbox, as well as reminding you of where you can go to get training. And then there's, of course, a readiness checklist. We are basically, whoops, sorry about that. We are basically looking at number 2 today. And so if you can kind of get started on those following this webinar, I think you're going to be in good shape. So let me switch over to Care Tracker and show you how to generate the reports and what's kind of involved with that. Before I get rolling, is there any questions anybody has, or anything in the chat that I need to be aware of? Looks like so far so good.
Nothing in the chat right now, Matt.
Okay, great. So the first step is trying to get a handle on what are the codes that we're even using in our practice. So you're going to want to start with going to reports, and we're going to be in the productivity reports. This is where you get lists of referring providers, diagnoses, procedures, fee schedules. This is kind of all of your lists that make up the process that you follow. So productivity in the other section, if you take the pull down, looking for top diagnosis codes, starts with T, so I'm going to scroll down to the T's, and here it is, top diagnosis codes by company. Now there is some criteria that you need to answer. My suggestion is just throw all your groups over there. Most of you only have one group, but if you have multiple groups, you might as well mine the data in those groups. The next thing to decide is how big do I want to include in this. So doing that may allow you to look past some inactive codes, but you might also be, by not getting quite a full picture, you can look back a year, you can go back more. The reports that I've run, I'm just doing a calendar year, so we'll just put in 01/01, 2015. I might as well go through yesterday. And then you need to decide how many diagnoses am I going to bite off here and try to deal with. You can start by just like running several hundred and then decide, or you can just start with 50 and add to it. Really doesn't matter. It's going to put the most frequent diagnoses that you've used in your practice at the top. So just for the sake of argument, I'll put in 100. This little formatting thing can be important. If you're going to print this out and handwrite, look up and handwrite things and then go back and enter later, you might be just as well served to work with Adobe. If you're going to create a living document, which is what I would recommend, then I would suggest using the Microsoft Excel data. You get an unformatted spreadsheet for that, and you can put it wherever it needs to go. You can even give it a name, and then we send that off to reports. And you'll notice this little thing down here at the bottom. Let me give you a little bit bigger. You notice at the bottom it says report has been sent to the queue. And you can always go and look and see if it's in the queue. Looks like that was a fast one that was in here for a minute. So now it's going to be over here in the published reports. There it is, test for demo. So if we wanted to, and I'm going to switch gears now, and I'm going to actually, rather than one from the demo company, I'm going to show you what the we'll take a quick peek at that, and then we'll use one that we've created from a different practice. So here's the test for demo. You'll notice that when it comes up, you may have to turn on editing, and you may have to adjust columns and things like that. But what you're going to end up with is the most frequently used diagnosis at the top and the number of times that it was used in the time frame that we discussed. Again, this is a demo database, probably not the best place to get my living lists. So I'm going to switch gears and go over to a different practice. The one thing I do want to mention is that feel free to take these spreadsheets and add to them. You might put in a column here for listing what the ICD-10 equivalent code is going to be, or listing notes and things like that. So when I show you the spreadsheet we're working off of, here, this is what something Bruce created. He's working on updating an encounter form for one of our clients, and he ran this report, and here we are with hypertension is number 1, 401.9. Notice it's unspecified. Number 2 is just this general routine health exam. Number 3, we start to get to be, the people on Coumadin or something like that. You notice at the top, just a bunch of unspecified, and that is really, this in a nutshell is why we're moving to ICD-10. ICD-10 is going to require you to look a little bit deeper. Now, just kind of as a billing 101 that most of you already know, if I today, using ICD-9, send an insurance claim through and I am not coding to the highest level of specificity, I'm going to get the claim back from the insurance company, and they're going to tell me, hey, this needs a 4th digit or a 5th digit or something along those lines. There are other edits where they may request notes if you're using a totally unspecified diagnosis. So we're trying to get away from unspecified and move into the more specific. So here's what I did. I took basically what Bruce was working on, and this 401.9 as a first one. There's several places you can go to search this. I just started in the diagnosis lookup tool. So if I put in a diagnosis, and that first one we were looking for again was, I'm going to get rid of that little one. The first diagnosis we were looking for was 401.9, or unspecified hypertension. So going back to my search, 401. Now if I put in this code exactly as it is, I'm going to get perhaps just like a 1-to-1 or something like that. I'm not going to get into my search mode, and it's not going to be very helpful. So the first thing you want to make note of is when you're searching, search for a little bit less than the full numeric value. You notice how I dropped the digit, the 0, and now I'm getting different choices. So if I wanted to view the mappings, I simply select one from the list. I was trying to get from 401.9 to what are the new codes that I'm going to need to know about. And if I click on the View Mappings icon up here, I'm now going to get a code. And my problem is I'm still potentially fairly generic. Now, on this one, it happens to be a one-to-one, so we're in pretty good shape. This I-10, I thought that was kind of humorous. I-10, like ICD-10, is the code we want. So if we look at the next code on the list, and now we're going to look for this routine exam, let's do the same thing. We're going to go back to our diagnosis search. I'm going to put in part, but not all of the code, and search so that I can get a list. Now, suddenly what I'm going to see there are a bunch of ICD-9 possibilities. The one that I'm looking for is just this routine exam, and so I select it. Again, I pick on the mappings, view mappings, and now I'm going to start to get a little more information. So in ICD-10, V70.0 from the ICD-9 is basically going to be one of two codes moving forward. There is no generic. I'm just doing a routine exam. We now are going to have to say I'm doing a routine exam, and either I did not find any abnormal findings, or I'm doing a routine exam and I did find abnormal findings. So one code now is going to require you to go with one or the other. So as we're thinking about what's going to end up on our encounter form, what I may want to make a note of on my little spreadsheet here is that this V70.0 is replaced with two codes, and so because it's fairly straightforward and it's not over the top, I might put both of those on my super deck, or I could choose to nest it. Let me show you one more type, and this one is going to have multiple types of codes to deal with, and this is the one that's going to cause you a little more problem. So we're looking now for unspecified hyperlipidemia 272.4. So we're going to do this same process again. We're going to go back to our search. We're going to search for, and isn't that terrible how I can forget in that quick a time, 272.4. And I don't want to search for the whole code, because if I do, I'm going to get an overly specific choice. So now on the 272.2, I'm going to drill in. I'm going to look for the mappings that associate with that.
I think it was 272.4.
Yeah. So now when I view the mappings for 272.4, I'm going to start to get more choices. Now here, this is where we start to cross over from what was fairly straightforward to something that might need a little more discussion with your provider. So one of the things that you're going to want to do when you start to see that I have lots of choices is you're going to want to search based on a term, the keyword term. So I'm still I haven't left my search mode. I'm just switching over to ICD-10 only, and now I start to get to see these trees. So this can give you choices. So at the end of the day, I might be deciding to put in Z13.220 along with several other choices. And so as you work with your providers and they're telling you, these are the 2 or 3 that I want, if you start listing those out, you can then, when you've mapped a bunch of codes, you can then start to look at strategically, do I want to list 10 codes out of what's possible, or do I want to select as quick as I can to Bruce? Let's put in hypertension. So when we go for hypertension and we're looking in ICD-10, look at how many choices I have. It can be overwhelming, right? So this is where you want to have providers helping you look at this and decide, you know, what really on this list is going to fit our practice. You can come up with kind of 3 possible scenarios. One scenario is, hey, it's only going to be this one code. It's pretty much 1-to-1. I'm just going to stick with that, and hopefully that flies for billing. The other one is going to be, you know, I can see on here where I've got 6 or 7 choices. It's always going to be that. Rarely will it be something else. That would be a candidate for doing the nesting on the encounter form that Bruce will show you here in a second. The other scenario that you need to be on the alert for is a provider that's going to say, you know, this is going to be all over the board. And while I may have had 1,200 of these in the first 5 months, I can see where any one of 20 of these might be used a bunch. And you might decide that now I'm getting too many choices to list, and it might be just as quick to have providers search for hypertension each time they're doing it. This is a discussion, and as Bruce shows you how you use the super bill, some of this should hopefully crystallize and come into view a little bit for you. Okay, so
okay, Matt, we have a question that came up here. The question says, should the ICD-10 code come up automatically in that other column? Why do we have to look it up?
Okay, so whoever asked that question, go ahead and unmute and let's drill into that a little bit. So I'm going to go to, I'm in the search area here. I'm assuming that is going to be okay. Which code were we talking about?
It was ICD-10, but I don't know what code she specifically. It was one of the girls from Suburban, I think.
Okay, so what we've got going on here is when I hit the search and I'm in a diagnosis search area, it's going to default to what our current search parameters are. So until we flip over to October 1st, it's going to be ICD-9. So that would mean we'd have to switch to 10 and then key something in. I'm probably just not doing a good job of understanding the question. You want to read it again, Tony?
The question just said, should the ICD code come up automatically in that other column? Why do we have to look it up? That's the question.
Okay, so when we're
the
doing
ICD-10 code.
Okay, so we started with our list, right? That was our starting point, and we wanted to search on an old code. So I'll pick another one here. Let's do 453.4. So I've got to start with something, 453, and if I put in a little bit less, I get more. So it's going to start with, and I'm in the wrong place, my bad. Let's switch over to diagnosis and try that again. So get my list here. Because I did not put in the full code, I'm getting a list to pick from, and I pick from the list, and this might be where you're talking about you basically are clicking it again and then you view the mappings. The problem will be the problem will be if you put in the full code, and I'm glad you're asking this, if you put in like 250.00, it's a complete code with all of the digits, and I'm searching for it, then you know, it will bring it up, and I do have to highlight it in order to get the mappings. So I'm not positive I've answered your questions. So at Suburban, if not, please follow up and let's get you an answer. I'm happy to call you after the webinar.
Matt, they couldn't. I don't think they could hear you, so they left. They may be trying to log back in.
Okay. All right. Will you watch that, Tony, and follow up with them?
Yeah, I'm watching it. Yep.
Okay. All right. So, and actually, that does bring us to the next section, because what we're talking about is now moving to encounter forms. And so, when we look at an encounter form, and I'll just go to the schedule, and we'll just bring one up so we can take a peek at it. When you're looking at the encounter form that you're going to use, and this does not have very many on it. It's just the training database. But if you imagine you had a whole page full of these codes, and you're looking at the prospect of that maybe increasing a factor of 4 or 5 times, you're not going to have really enough room if you ever end up needing to print an encounter form. And so that's why when we look at this list of codes and we compare it to what's on the encounter form, we're trying to be strategic about what codes we put on there. Another point, just as a takeaway, is if when you're looking at your encounter form, you've got diagnosis codes on there that do not hit the top 50 or 100 or 200, then I think that would just be simply a discussion with the provider. Hey, is this on here because you had a hard time remembering it? And are you going to probably, since we've got a not very often used code, are you probably going to be better off as a provider searching from scratch for that than you are potentially trying to have a shortcut that gets you to grab the wrong code? Just a discussion with the provider, and you can decide to go either way with that. So Bruce, I'm going to hand it off to you, and if you want to take us through entering an encounter form, that would be fabulous. Let me get over here. While I'm switching this, any questions on how to identify the diagnosis codes that you're using?
We're having a little problem with the suburban people. They're not able to hear. They lost their volume. So I'm suggesting that they log back in, log off, and log back in.
Okay, sounds good. And that's why we're recording it. And if we need to do it, redo it just for them, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Okay, Bruce, you should have the share if you want it.
Okay. So can everybody hear me okay? I'll presume yes.
I am hearing you quite well, Bruce.
Okay.
I hear you quite well as well.
Alrighty. So most of you, most folks will have what we're calling the old encounter form. And some of you do have the new encounter form, but you still have ICD 9 codes in your diagnosis section. So right now I'm in our training group. In order to either build a new one or modify your current encounter form, you're going to go to Administration and then Setup, and it's the top middle, Encounter Form Maintenance. And this will show the list of all encounter forms that you have access to, not necessarily all of yours. All of these that say company were built in the training company. Global ones are from somewhere else, but they show up here. If they're grayed out, it means they're old encounter forms. So all of these are grayed out. We can't click on these icons. So those are built with the old encounter form. This top one, Test New Encounter Form, was built with the new encounter form. So if I click here, I can edit it. If I wanted to build a new one, I would click up here on New Encounter Form, and then I would fill in various fields, how many tables I want, how many columns I want, the name, the size of my font, whether I want the text to wrap, etc. I'm going to go back out and go into the one we've already created. And so here's the name. I could change that or any of these things. Header and footer, you actually have control over, where you used to not have control over the header and footer. You can turn on and off various, but I would suggest just leaving it as is unless there's some need. The last two tabs are for your procedures and diagnosis codes. So if you want to create a new category, a new grouping, you can click here and you can name it whatever you want. You can look at what's already been used. Chances are you want to create a new name, and we could say procedure 4. And then you can add your CPT codes. So let's say I had a 36415. You'd enter it here and either click on enter or the search icon, and it'll give you all the codes that match that description. So we would choose the first, and it would go over to the right side. These are all the procedures, all the CPT codes for this category. And you can go in here and change the name to whatever you'd like to see on your encounter form. These fields over here for bold and italics, those are only going to show up in a printed encounter form, and most of you won't be using printed encounter forms. You can preview what you have so far. Oh, it says you got to save them. So make sure you save often.
Save often.
Save. It's always a good practice. And then you can preview it, see how it's looking. It's one you've already seen. And so here's our diagnosis codes. And sorry, so that was procedures. Diagnosis is much the same. But what I'm going to do is show you one we're currently working on for a client. Lori from McLaughlin has graciously let us use theirs as an example. So I'm going to move over to their company and bring up their encounter form. Well, first, let me show you their old encounter form. It's right here. So they have different procedure groups, and that's not going to change. Down here, they have a few columns, diagnosis codes. And so I ran the report for them, and this is, I think you already saw one for them, and from that I created a spreadsheet, just like Matt was talking about, to keep track of progress in the diagnosis section. So I'll come back to this shortly. So let me go back into So again, we'll go to encounter form maintenance, and here's their new encounter form. And I've already created all the procedures. Geez, a second, I think I need to do a refresh. That encounter form maintenance. Edit procedures. Okay, so here's all their categories, just the same as before. I can preview it. And we already saw how to create categories and add CPT codes to them. Here's the diagnoses I've done so far, so let's go look at those. So click on the diagnosis tab. So when I was going through this, I looked at their encounter form. Lori opted to work through, instead of working through the top codes down, decided to work through the existing encounter form. So I started with abdominal pain, and I looked up the code, the mapping, and then we're going to meet and make those decisions that Matt was talking about, how many codes to use. So if we look back here under abdominal pain, when you search on R10.9, you come up with several codes. So I put the mapping, let me just show it, R10.9, not R10.9, sorry, diagnosis, 789.0, so I'm going to put in 789. I searched on that. So just like Matt was showing you how to search for codes, you can search within the encounter form for those same codes. So 789.00 is what they had on their current encounter form. So I selected that, viewed the mappings, And the star means this is probably the best choice, or as it says, the premier pick. So I selected R10.9, which gave me the whole tree. So at this point, it's like, how many of these should I put in? And we'll have that discussion. But I chose to, what did I choose? Yeah, R10.9, which is highlighted, and I selected it, and it added it to the encounter form. Now I have two of them, but I can delete it. So it added it over here on the right side. So I'm going to delete that since I already have it up above. So if we look at what we've done, here's R10. Now on the right, here's a grouping. So Matt mentioned nesting. There's a chance we could end up with a lot more diagnosis codes now than we had before. So what you can do is nest them. So only the top level code shows up, and you click on an arrow next to it to see the others. So right here, R10.0, 10.10, 10.30, these three are nested under the 10.9. So if I click on 10.9, it'll show me these three. And I can choose to nest however I want. Now, if I don't like the order, I can move things around just by clicking and dragging wherever I want to put them. And see, what else do I want to mention? Well, let's go see how this looks on the online encounter form. So if I go to the schedule, and I think today we have Joe Test. So we can choose procedure, go to diagnosis. So there's not a lot of diagnosis codes yet, but we're working on it. So I could choose one of these, or I could, where you see this little right arrow, kind of a play button, to the right of it, you could click on that, and then you get the next level down. You can nest 2 levels. So notice under 10.30, I can go down another level. So I could choose any of these, and there are all of these, and select, and it'll go up here. You can also search for a diagnosis, like the hypertension that Matt was talking about. You may not want to list a bunch of those. You could type it in here and search for it. Are there any questions on either building the encounter form or using the online visit capture?
So Bruce, this is Matt, and I have a question on those groupings of within the encounter form, like the category names and where they go. If you build it and everything is fine, but then you suddenly decide, ooh, I want to move this column over to the right, and I want to rename it, things like that. How friendly is it for you to make changes after you've kind of built it? So, and my question is geared at, do you have to really think all the way through how it has to be because it's not forgiving, or is it a little bit forgiving and you can kind of do some stuff on the fly, rearranging wise?
Yeah, it's pretty forgiving. So right now, if we preview it, I look here and I see, oh, I really want this supplies section at the bottom of my second column, because this column is getting overloaded. Actually, it's not, but let's say it is. So I can go back in here, find the supplies, and say I want that at the bottom of column 2 instead of top of column 3. So I'm going to change it to column 2 and make sure it's at the bottom. I can give it an 8. Save that. And if we preview it, it should be the bottom of column 2 for lucky. And there it is. So it's down here now. So you can move right. Categories around.
Thank you, Bruce. Easily. That's awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions on the encounter forum?
No, go ahead and show us how it looks when they're actually putting that nesting into play from the electronic encounter form of the visit, as they call it.
Yeah, that's what I just showed. So again, if you have an appointment, and again, the appointment needs to be tied to that encounter form. This appointment type, test appointment, is tied to this new encounter form. Go into the visit. Procedures, all same as before. For diagnosis, if this symbol right here, the little play button, shows you that there's some nesting. So for this one, you can check any of these. And this one, like I showed you, we have 2 levels of nesting, if you want to get that fancy. So that's 6 codes that didn't have to show up on the main level encounter form. So just try it. It helps keep it a little simple.
Great. And what tips would you give people, and Cheryl, feel free to pipe in. Cheryl and Bruce are building encounter forms for clients now. Like everything, there are some hard lessons you learn the hard way. What are the things that you'd want people to make sure they're aware of so that they don't put in a lot of work only to have it disappear on them?
Save a lot throughout your work. Save often. I can't stress that enough. Save often.
So don't hit save as long as you're willing to lose what you just did. Hit save if you want to be assured. Makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
Besides that, I think just going about it, and I was going to show you the spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet. Yep.
Bruce, I have a question on one of the gals. Still a little confused on the nest diagnosis.
On the nesting?
Yeah.
Okay. So for abdominal pain, there are many codes, many different codes for abdominal pain.
And I suspect it's on the. Pam, you probably get how once it's in the encounter form, a provider would click down to it. My guess is it has to do with when you're building the encounter form, how you make something roll up to a higher code.
Yeah. I mean, we have 100 codes going to 300 codes right now. I need them all.
So the way to do the nesting is you choose, you're going to enter all the codes that you want, then you decide which one is going to be my top one. And what I chose to do was the unspecified abdominal pain, and then the more specific diagnoses would group under that. So this is R10.9 for abdominal pain unspecified. For these that I want to not show at the top level, not show on the main encounter form, but show up when I click on that nesting icon, I would choose that code R10.9. So it'll show up under R10.9. And one of those is R10. Yeah.
And I was going to say, if you on that grouping where you have it, if it says none, then that means it's going to show on the encounter form. And if you're thinking about the paper encounter form, none means it's going to be visible in the bottom. If there is anything other than none in there, then it's going to be a code under which that the specific code you're now changing the grouping on, you're basically filing it underneath whatever code you put in the grouping area. So you literally could have 100 codes grouped under one. You could list 100 codes on there, and if every single one of those had, pick a code in there, when you clicked on that nesting, all 100 codes would pop up, and then you can sub list them too. So when you're picking where to nest them, you need to be aware of, am I nesting it with something that is going to show on the encounter form, something that had previously a none in the grouping, or am I creating a second level of nesting? If so, then it's I'm picking an item that is already nested and has something in the grouping other than none. And this is kind of crazy stuff. So Pam, if it still doesn't make sense, give us a shout after this. We'd be happy to let you play in the training company and work with a little bit on your own.
All right. Just want to share one more thing. So as I was working through these, one code, 610.1, was not even in the top 200 codes. I think ran more than 200 codes. So I'm keeping track of those. Like, well, maybe we shouldn't have these on the encounter form anymore if they haven't been used in the last year, say. And here I'm keeping track of all the ones that I've mapped and questions. So any other questions? We should probably move on to Bradley.
Yep, very good. Thank you, Bruce. So if no more questions, Bradley, are you ready to take the stage?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud, probably better than Bruce and I put together.
Yes, we can hear you. Yay.
Yeah. Nice. So yes, you're the presenter, and Brad is going to take us through basically the problem list. Now, the problem list is something that if you never went to the EMR at all, a problem list would become built, if you will, by all of the diagnosis codes that you put into visits or use for billing as you're in the system. So if you bring up a patient that has been in the system and has maybe 20 visits, there's a good chance that if you haven't managed the problem list and inactivated old codes, you could bump into something where you have 10, 15, 20 or more diagnosis codes. And one of the things that if you're using the EMR you're going to need to do is kind of keep that problem list cleaned up. The whole problem is compounded now for two things. One, when we go to ICD-10, we may not care what the ICD-9 code was, so it's probably time to get that inactivated and off of the list. But number two, I may really only want to deal with chronic diagnosis codes. So Brad, why don't you take us through managing the problem list?
Okay. So hopefully everybody's seeing my screen. You could take a look at the schedule and pull this patient into context. And then once the patient is in context, you could click on their medical record. So this is just a suggested workflow. Patient comes in, got to clean up their ICD-9s, ICD-10s, or as Matt was saying, this is their problem list. Now I'm in the medical record. Is everybody familiar with this? Ask any questions. Look, and he looks like a German Shepherd. Click on the problem list. And here now is this problem list. Notice the difference between influenza with pneumonia and this next problem, other primary cardiomyopathies. This is a single code. This is two codes. On the left is the ICD-9. On the right is the ICD-10. So I know that this is now a current diagnosis with a mapping to the ICD-10 code. Okay, makes sense so far? And what I want to do is take a look at this and go, wow, I've got a bunch of codes here that I don't need. I can see when they were last diagnosed by date. This is the onset date. Here's the provider. If we've actually drilled down into these ICD-9s and actually assigned a physician and all that stuff, you can actually see that when you click in here to allergic rhinitis cause unspecified, you can actually set the provider if the provider's been set, and this is all the stuff that now COPIG is looking for, right? You can set the status. You can set the state. And if you set the status to resolved, for example, it automatically fills in today's date. or you could set the status to inactive to inactivate this ICD-9 code. What you can also set the sequence right here. If you want it to be the first on the list, there's 30, you could actually say where you want this to show up within our problem list. One of the things that you could do is you could go through this list with your providers and go, which codes do I need to get rid of? Can you write those down? And they can be just, because I'm going to mark those inactive. So that instead of going into every one and inactivate it individually, you could click on this change status link right here. If you click on change status, I want to select, I'm going to inactivate, and then the following codes. You could select all, none, that kind of thing. If you need to reactivate, any questions so far on that? So let's say I want to get other primary cardiomyopathies on this list with the ICD-9 and the ICD-10. So I've got the pairing, okay? I'm going to, instead of actually writing down the code, I'm going to remember the other primary cardiomyopathies. I'm going to inactivate this. Save. So as soon as this refreshes, that's going to be gone. And then I'm going to go and add a diagnosis. And also bear in mind that let me click on it one more time here. There we go. So I'm going to click on this search icon. Maybe my internet's a little slow here. I'm not on my, so I'm going to go other cardio, and I'm not going to bother to spell all of it out. Actually, less is more in this case. And if you, so cardiomyopathies is maybe not even, so let me go cardiomyopathies. So here's now cardiomyopathies, maybe I want to do unspecified. And this is where you might want to be working with your providers so that they're actually getting, there is no unspecified, so that you're actually getting the diagnosis specifically that you really want. So it might be associated with mutation, it might be whatever it's going to be. And so it's one of those things where it's, the mappings are not exact, right? And so I could either select this, or if I'm unsure because I got rid of that other one, it's not actually deleted. All I have to do is go back here, click on Show Inactive, and now I'm going to see my inactive, and it was 425.4, so I could actually go in and look for the ICD-9 code if I wanted as well. So I could go in here, once again, search 425, search, see if there's, if it finds, here's other hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and you could do that. And also, as Matt and Bruce pointed out, your problem list here is getting built by the diagnoses that you pop into the visit sheet. The objective of this is to now get to where you can click on here. So here are these filters up here. And you really want to get to a chronic problem list, which is showing, when you click into this, it's going to show who the provider is, the status, the state, is it controlled, well controlled. You can put in notes, you can put a sequence in here, and this allows the providers to actually transfer these chronic problem lists to their visit and easily so that when they're in the chart note, this is easy for them to refer to. And this problem list has been cleaned up. And then one of the things you can do, you want to make sure that you've got the appropriate permissions and roles to do so. You click on Mark Reviewed, and that's helpful as well. Any point in time you see a plus sign, you can tree that out. It actually shows you some of the historical entries on that ICD-9 code /10 code. This is one we'd want to clean up. Making sense? Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Brad. That's cool. I especially like the ability when you change status to inactivate in one fell swoop a whole bunch of them. That'll definitely speed things up. So I know there is one question in the chat that has to do with dual coding, and the answer is yes. And I'm going to show you that next. Any more questions on cleaning up the problem list? No. So here's the thought process. A doctor, a provider is going to be, come October 1st, they're working with the electronic medical record, they're going to be potentially presented with patient records that have these unwieldy patient lists. We want you to understand what the choices are on cleaning it up. You've got a couple of routes you can go. You can spend time in a patient's record and clean it up and search and map and do that type of thing. The plus side is it's going to be a beautiful looking chart come October 1st. The downside is you can't possibly go in and touch all of the patient charts beforehand. It's just an unbelievable amount of time. So what you want to be able to do is know what's involved with the process, have your providers aware that old codes need to be replaced with new codes, and talk to them what their comfort level is. I can imagine a workflow where you guys decide to just inactivate everything that's not dual coded and let the providers go from scratch. That's certainly a way to go. You might spend time on patients that you know are regulars and clean those up, but it's going to really take a collaboration between the provider, who's ultimately got to code this, front office, who may be able to do a little bit ahead of time, MAs, the clinical staff. So please play with this a little bit now. Do some searching of codes, pick a few patients, try to clean up their problem list and pull in the dual codes, just so you know what you're looking at. You know, there's still time to come up with pretty decent solutions for workflow, but you need to know what you're dealing with, and you need to know what the doctor's or provider's tolerance is for doing this, and what the availability of support in this might be. So let's go ahead and talk about dual coding and the claims process. So in dual coding, where we want to start with this is the very first thing we need to do is make sure that we've turned dual coding on. It's in administration, setup, and it is right here, group diagnosis code settings. You would just simply hit this radio button. This would be no, I don't want to allow for dual coding, and this would be yes. You guys do not need to worry about populating the insurance companies down here. This comes into play when an insurance company needs to have the codes sent that are different than the default for that insurance company. So right now, every insurance company is set at ICD-9. As we get closer to October 1st, CareTracker will be turning on the payers, Medicare, Medicaid, Cigna, Aetna, United Healthcare, that definitely need ICD-9. There are other payers that may not, work comp, may be left at ICD-10. When you're dealing with this in real time come October 1st, you might bump into a scenario where either at an insurance company or an insurance plan that the payer needs you to submit codes that are different than the default for that company. And so that would be where you might add something to the list here. So once you've got dual coding turned on, and we're going to go to our scheduling, and you can of course either do this from the visit or from clinical today to get to the visit, but I'm going to just go ahead and do a visit for this patient. And I'm just going to pick an office visit. I'm going to, on the diagnosis, let's, I'm trying to think of which one I was having luck with before. It doesn't matter. We'll pick.
I would suggest, Matt, maybe dizziness would be one. A good.
Okay, so we'll do dizziness. Thank you, Cheryl. And so let's put in both the ICD-9 and the ICD-10. So I've got dizziness checked down below, but I need to search for it. Again, I'm not going to put in the whole thing. I could search for the word dizziness if I wanted. But when we get this, 780.4, here it is. I select it. I look at my mappings by clicking on the View Mappings. There's a good choice. I'm going to just pull it in. And so now I have dual coded this particular visit. I've got a 10 and a 9 code. I'm going to go ahead and go to the visit summary. Now, when you look at the visit summary, here's a little clue as to what is this payer set for. This payer is set for ICD-9. This would either be the default, or if you've put in an override, it would be the override. So United Healthcare wants ICD-9 codes. You'll notice in my diagnosis column here, I've got both the 9 and the 10. If I needed to take the 10 out here, I certainly could. I'm going to leave it in to show you what we want to have happening. I'll just save this visit. And now I'm going to show you where you would actually manage these. So you turn it on in administration. You put in overrides in administration. To manage it, this is a dashboard issue. So we start with home, and we go to management, and we go to dual coding review. So let's look at that real quick again. Turning on dual coding, admin, setup, group diagnosis code settings, yes or no here, add companies here by clicking on the add insurance override. When I'm going to manage the charges I've created, it's the dashboard, home, management, dual coding review. When I click into dual coding review, I'm going to see the claims that are dual coded. And I can go in and I can edit these. Now this is the training database, so none of these claims actually create an 837 file. But once these claims have been created and there is an 837 file that was generated by the system, you can come over here and click on the checkbox. It's grayed out because I haven't actually created an 837 file, but once it has been created, you could click on that. And then once you've clicked on the appropriate claims, you could generate a test file by hitting this button down here. Once you get into this mode, the test files, you might ask, why would I want a test file? Well, you probably don't. But if you're concerned about a specific payer and they have asked or allowed you to provide them with an ANSI 837 file, this would be where you do that. You could test by uploading that. Once I select a file and hit generate, I would then see claims in the test queue. This is just like printing, and when it's been finished, it would be in the prepared. I'd get an item in here, just like a document that I could download. That file could then be uploaded into the payer's database. And so for any of you that haven't worked with the ANSI file, the 837 file, you may have noticed before in claim summary this little link right here, this ANSI 837 file. This is what an 837 file looks like right here. So it's a bunch of gibberish, but basically when you turn on dual coding, you are creating the ability to have ICD-9 or ICD-10 or both codes in this file, which could then be uploaded to payers if you needed to. One of the things we want to make you aware of, the question that we had from Suburban was, is this ready to roll? So the answer is yes and no. It's ready to roll now. You can create your dual-coded claims. there is a small remaining issue that we want to get resolved. What we've been doing for the providers that are doing dual coding today, we've had to go in because we're getting claims come back to us on the claims work list as a payer edit, and they look just like this. They have this ICD denial right here, claims edit, and what we've been having to do manually is go in and delete the ICD-10 code. The system is supposed to pull those out, and there's some little thing with getting this finalized to make sure that they're properly coming out. So if you want to do this, my suggestion is send Cheryl a to-do and ask her to let you know when the claims will automatically have the extra set of codes removed so that you don't have to manually do it. You can do it now. You can test a few. My recommendation is spend your time today identifying the codes that you're going to use to start working on a new encounter form and incorporating the ICD-10 codes into at least one version of that encounter form. You probably want one version that's ICD-9 only and another version that's ICD-10 only. And by the time you've gotten an appreciable amount of work done on that, I'm certain the dual coding will be seamless where you don't have to go in and delete codes. So I know a lot of this is very confusing, and until you get in and work hands-on, it probably is more confusing than not. But what we just demonstrated today is how to identify your codes, how to do new encounter forms, how to clean up the problem list, which is potentially a very big endeavor, and then how to do dual coding. Before we end the session, do we have any questions that we can help you with?
There are a few questions that popped up.
Yeah.
Tony, did you do those?
Yeah. Well, I think you answered the question about Medicare. Can they test with Medicare now?
So Medicare actually CareTracker has tested with. So in order to test with Medicare, you got to get on this long list. A lot of things have to happen. I can tell you you're absolutely good to go with Medicare. However, if you can find someone at Medicare that is willing to accept your 837 test file, you absolutely could use the dual coding review to generate some claims with both ICD-9 and ICD-10 in it. And once it's in the dual coding review dashboard, you would definitely be able to create a test file which could be provided to Medicare or any other payer. The trick is talking to the payer and knowing an avenue at which you can upload the code. CareTracker is testing globally with any payer that will test with them, and there have been 0 glitches. They were successful on ICD-10 testing last year, and that has not changed. In spite of the many revisions and updates to CareTracker, it's still rolling along nicely. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, Ramona has a question, but I don't really understand it. Her question says, so it will, looks like, only get sent out with ICD-9.
Can you hear me?
What?
Yep, and that's, yep, and so that's actually, yes, we can hear you. Is that Ramona talking?
Yes, it is. So my question,
hey,
Matt, hi. So my question is, when you were creating that visit, and you had dual coded it, and prior to hitting that send, yeah, when you were creating the visit, not necessarily here.
Let's do Donald Buck's visit.
Sorry, visit, yeah. So on the diagnosis screen.
Get that. We'll go over here. Okay.
Yep. And where you put the code in, search for the new code, so then you had a dual code, and then when you had the visit summary on the next step, on that where it says search diagnosis ICD-9, and that's what came up, but you did have your 10 on there as well.
Okay.
However, the 9 was still highlighted, does that claim go out with just the 9 on it? Because like you were just saying, you had those ICD-10 denials with that. Those I just got 4 of those.
Right. So those are, so today it's supposed to come out, but something's going on at the clearinghouse level, and I don't know exactly what it is, and they're working on fixing that. So when they get that resolved, yes, it will strip out the ICD-10 code. Today as we speak, you're having to do that after it comes back on that claim edit. So I would say, rather than spending time creating visits with ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes, I'd put that on hold and ask Cheryl to let you know when that issue is resolved. I would instead spend my time looking at my top codes and trying to map those, or building the encounter form, or cleaning up problem lists for patients that you know are going to be an issue.
Right, yeah, I understand that. So just code them as 9s right now, correct?
Just code them as 9s in the actual visit, but hopefully we're talking about a matter of days before that's resolved.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You bet.
And Matt, we may want to mention if it'd be a good idea to start on your encounter forms soon, since October 1st is coming fast. And if you need our help, just let us know. We can help you do those.
Yep, we're happy to pick it up. We're happy to do it any way you want. We can get the basics built for you so you don't have to deal with categories and things like that. We can clean it up after you think you're done with it, but you have the problems. We can just do a training session with you and build it together. We really don't care. It's however you want to get it done. We've got some people that are like, you know what, I never want to build another encounter form as long as I live. Please just build it, and we're doing that as well.
Matt, one more question here. Looks like from Barbie. Why am I already seeing 10 codes on my claim when I haven't entered any?
Somebody must have entered them somewhere. We could do, so there is on this dual coding review, there's a log. What I would recommend is, get to the right thing, that we maybe drill into it. Somewhere along the line, somebody's got to add it. They're not just coming in on their own. Barbie, who's the payer that's happening on?
I'm not really sure. It's just that when I'm going in and seeing claims before I send them, I'm already seeing some ICD-10s included showing up on the billing screen. Not in the visit, but on the billing screen before I save it to send it out.
Yeah, my guess is, I think what we might want to do, Barbie, is review your super bill that they're using. But it sounds to me like in the electronic medical record somewhere there might be a search. You might have providers who are trying to get ahead of the game and are putting it in the medical record, and then of course if they put it in the medical record it'll flow through to the visit, and that would be why they're showing up. So recommendation for you, Barbie, is to just head it off at the pass. Wherever it is you're touching claims the first time, I would just delete the 10s for now.
Okay.
And as soon as that functionality is resolved, then you can leave them in and ignore them, and they should not matter. But so are you today getting that edit back?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I'm interested to know more. Cheryl, would you follow up with Barbie and take a look at what she's talking about, just so that we don't have a larger issue brewing for her? And Cheryl may have actually dropped off. So oh no, she's there. Yeah, I'll make sure, Barbie, that Cheryl takes
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I'll follow up with Barbie.
That's great. That's great. Okay. All right, any other questions? Those are all fabulous, and we really, really appreciate everybody's attendance on this, and we know it's going to be a long process, so please don't hesitate to ask for our input and our help. We're more than happy to provide it. Okay, thanks everybody. We will make sure we have this website, and I once again just want to thank you for your attendance. Bye-bye.